This is What's Left America. I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm Andy Georgeson.
I'm O.J. Simpson. No, I'm James Campbell.
And I'm Chris Bell.
What's Left America is proudly produced by Left Out Media and brought to you by the generosity of our friends and sponsors like the Houston Federation of Teachers. That's local 2415 AFL-CIO and Stoli Vodka, and hopefully someday friends just like you. Today on the show, we're going to cover some great topics. Kavanaugh served up, PTSD, that's post-Trump stress disorder. We got a new game. This game is taking over America. Which job would you rather have? Tucker Carlson and his diversity politics and the news titans. And, of course, we'll finish the show with Out of Left Field. But before we get into the show, I want to talk to you all about something I found just this morning. It really is amazing. It's scary at the same time. It's the Presidential Alert System that the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is testing this week a new system to allow President Trump to send text messages directly to every U.S. cell phone in the case of an emergency.
No, thank you.
Let me say that again. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, when he determines there's a national emergency, gets to text every one of us.
So this happened about presidential fiat.
But can you imagine what those will look like? Storm heading your way. Sad. All caps.
It's the Democrats. It was the Democrats caused that storm.
A beautiful storm. A tremendous storm.
If your neighbor dies, don't report it. I mean, they'll be phenomenal.
I couldn't believe it. And and FEMA actually had to put in the press release, don't worry, President Trump will not abuse this.
Well, but here's the thing that's interesting, Chris. It's like Trump's approval rating, 32% of Americans basically support him. And, you know, if you send that to Americans that don't like him, they won't look at that as credible. None of the stuff that comes out of his mouth are credible to most. That's right. It's credible to most Americans.
This is the same thing as you get over the television airwaves and the radio airwaves. You cannot opt out. It goes to every cell phone in the United States. It's the same alert system.
That's abuse right there. That will cause me to have trauma or something. I can't get.
Do you think it's going to be like that time that U2 released that album to everyone on iTunes and people rioted? It's like we don't want this free album.
I'm sorry, we gave you something for free and you're mad.
Well, it's like, kids, get under your desk to protect yourself from this nuclear attack by Kim Jong-il.
I was old enough to have to do that.
Yeah.
Let me just say, as one whose home flooded 3 times in the last few years,
is this a GoFundMe?
That's the last thing I would have wanted to receive some message from that motherfucker.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into the first topic. Kavanaugh served up. In the postmortem of Judge Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing, new developments came up last week. Turns out that Dianne Feinstein got an anonymous letter in June, right after President Trump nominated him, alleging that he sexually assaulted a girl in high school. And it laid out according to Dianne Feinstein, a pretty credible case. Now, today, but right before we started taping today's show, the lady came out publicly. Her name is Christine Blasey Ford. She did a story today's Sunday, did a story with the Washington Post, finally said who she was, and said she came out publicly because reporters were showing up at her office anyway, and she said she might as well come out and do it publicly because her anonymity was blown. Democrats had said we needed to stop this nomination because of this allegation. The FBI would not investigate it because they didn't know who it was. In researching this topic, I found the other person. She said there was 2 people in the room, Kavanaugh and another high school mate. And Kavanaugh came out and said, "I didn't do it." A straight up, flat denial. The other guy in the room said, "I have no recollection of that event." Now, come on.
As an attorney, when you hear someone say they have no recollection.
Well, look, when someone says to me, "Do you remember when we met at the mall and shared an Orange Julius?" I might say I have no recollection of that event. when someone says you raped me in high school,
you say,
you either remember that or you don't.
Didn't do it.
That's right. Yeah. I'm just stunned by that.
I thought it was very frustrating because we didn't know who she was. We couldn't see the letter. We had no way to judge the allegations, but they still sounded credible in that we knew that when Kavanaugh's name was put forward, the woman talked to friends, said that his name coming up triggered these memories and bad feelings about him. You know, she talked about it. It did not sound like something that was made up out of whole cloth. But what were you going to do with it? You know, there wasn't enough information. Yeah. Now that the woman's come forward, her story sounds very credible. You were saying earlier.
I was basically saying that, you know, the freaks come out on the Supreme Court. And this is just a continuation of the Republicans' morals evolving when it comes to Supreme Court nominations.
Devolving.
Well, evolving because with Clarence Thomas, it was, you know, the things that he said to Anita Hill and the things that were alleged that he did and the hair on the Coke can, right? But now here's someone saying, you know, they dismissed that, right? She was basically drugged through the mud. They dismissed that. Now we have a woman who 30 years later basically says that this happened, and so the Republicans are going to nominate him, confirm him anyway. But the thing is, it's like this is just parlor chatter between us because it's not going to change anything. It's going to call into question his credibility.
Well, it could. I mean, it might.
It's not going to change anything. The Republicans are going to move forward with this.
But I think it's an interesting discussion, too. We recently faced this issue here in the Houston area when the superintendent of the Katy School District was faced with allegations of bullying back when he was in high school. He apparently was a very popular superintendent, but then ended up resigning. And there was a lot of discussion about how far back do you go?
I think that there is a place for redemption, but first you have to say that you did it, acknowledge that you wronged someone. You have to make a credible apology, and then let people have a chance to offer forgiveness. But you can't lie your way out of it and expect that no one's going to care.
Well, it's been working so far. It worked for Donald Trump, got him elected. Senate Republicans, after this was announced today that she did this story, said they're still moving forward. They're going to confirm him this week. And so it really doesn't matter to them. The Senate Democrats are pressing to delay the vote long enough for the FBI to investigate this allegation.
Well, Dianne Feinstein had this letter before. Feinstein. Okay. Feinstein. I have a problem with
Feinstein to release this letter.
Feinstein. Anyway, she had this letter ahead of time and could have released it, and it could have become part of the confirmation.
She could not. She couldn't because of the confidentiality promise. So she really was walking
of the accuser.
Yeah, she did not want to violate that promise of confidentiality. So she was kind of stuck. She wanted it on the record that this allegation is out there, but she couldn't show any evidence.
Did she have the lady's permission to make it public when she did? I haven't understood this whole dynamic. I held it this long because I wanted to protect her confidentiality, but now to hell with it, I'm just going to blow it. I mean, I don't get that.
I thought she didn't have it until I don't know how long she had it in
that is the confusing part about this. Why not release this if you could go to her and say, hey, now the woman is saying, I want to create my own narrative around this. But before, everybody else was whispering about this letter, but it wasn't public.
Well, you know what? Be that as it may, we're talking about the wrong thing. Why it was released, when it was released, whatever. There are so much information about this candidate that we don't know because there is so much missing information about him. So this is
withheld
information.
Yeah. This is another piece of it.
This is another piece of it.
Well, I guess the real question is if he attempted to sexually assault this woman when he was in high school with a friend, should that disqualify him from serving on the Supreme Court?
Right. That's the question.
If he is lying about it, Yes.
Should it disqualify him from serving as the basketball coach of his daughter's team?
Yeah.
Okay,
Also,
yeah.
Listen,
but I mean, it's a serious issue, and I think it goes to his character. One, that he lied about not knowing about emails, that he personally exchanged emails about torture and everything else, and now he's like categorically and unequivocally denying that this happened 30 years ago. Now it calls into question what the Republicans are going to do, particularly female senators and male senators.
Two Republican senators are really on the...
So they have to have like 2 or 3 flip to be able to send this back to a nomination process.
I think what Andy said was really interesting about redemption, because yes, I mean, people in high school make foolish mistakes, and I do think that they should be able to get past that, but it's hard if you're just going to play like it didn't happen. I mean, earlier today you heard James Campbell act like I never beat him 6-0 in tennis. He just conveniently forgot about that. But I mean,
he doesn't. He has no recollection of that event.
He has no recollection. But that's not a terribly serious thing. I agree with Chris Tritico that you're not going to forget about something like this, and he should have apologized. But it also begs the question: why didn't it come out when they were in high school? What happened?
Well, the story is that's what actually makes it credible for me was when she finally came out and did the interview. She said, "I didn't talk about this for all these years till I was in therapy with my husband, in counseling with my husband." The first time I discussed it was with the counselor, and she gave up the notes from the counselor where she discussed it. It made the story more credible.
Sure. I mean, surely we all understand at this point. I mean, men understand at this point that it's not easy to come forward and say someone violated me, because the victim is usually the person who's blamed. Well, why were you at the party? Well, why did you wear that? Well, what but the slut shaming is real.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because in court, when I'm representing someone who's accused of sexually assaulting someone, I can't do that anymore. Well, I can't attack someone for their prior sexual history. I can't even bring it up.
Well, you can't, or you don't think it's right to
do that. No, the law prohibits it.
But would you do
what everybody used to do. But back at the time
period, the laws are put in place to protect a victim with their prior sexual history. I cannot say you have screwed everybody else in the country, therefore you must have screwed this guy. Well, you can't do that anymore, except for here.
It's horrible that it takes a law to stop people from the fact that women are sexual beings and have sex does not give men the right to rape them. And so it actually should not take a law. And I understand as attorneys, you give the most not aggressive, but the most robust defense of your
zealous defense
that you can.
Right.
But to put a rape victim on trial is in this day and age, it just seems so backward.
That's why we've taken pains to protect them.
Well, you didn't wear a burqa. No wonder.
All right, we have to move on, but I want to bring up one more point before we move on for this. Is it becoming the point where when you run for president, like that not anymore, but when you're going to be on the Supreme Court, that everything you've done in your entire life is put under such a microscope, and it's become such a political contest that we're going to break down the men and women who we're nominating to the point where it's not worth even getting nominated for the court?
Well,
are people going to start saying, I don't want to go through that?
I don't think every hearing is going to be like this, but this is a somewhat unique circumstance given the way this has all transpired, not allowing Merrick Garland to have a hearing, the Republicans not allowing Merrick Garland
and portraying this guy as a Boy Scout when he's not.
Yeah, and given how controversial this was going to be, of course, it was going to receive this kind of attention, and it's on the White House to have researched everything.
This is a lifetime appointment. Right. It's a lifetime appointment, and these people deserve a great deal of scrutiny. But let's also remember what's at stake. This candidate and the Republican Party are trying to hide this person's record on issues that the court is going to face, namely how he's going to react to a Trump indictment, not to mention abortion rights and something else that does not come to mind right now that is very important. But, this is not just about him doing a drunken thing at a party in high school.
This affects the nation for the next 50 years, is what you're trying to say, I think. All right, let's move on. PTSD, post-Trump stress disorder. It's going to be in the new DSM when it comes out. Can a shrinking GOP maintain control of Congress nationally or even locally? There's been a whole bunch of stories over the last few months about how the GOP is shrinking. I saw this story yesterday. Ohio's wealthiest Republican donor has left the GOP and is now an independent. During a panel discussion at a leadership summit, Leslie Wexner, a billionaire CEO of L Brands, announced, "I just decided I'm no longer a Republican." The development came just days after President Obama slammed GOP lawmakers during a rally in Ohio. And Wexner said, "Obama's visit to Ohio did this for me. It was a great moment for the community," according to the newspaper. He said, "I was struck by the genius of the man, his candor, humility, and empathy for others." And he compared that to Donald Trump. And he said, "I can't be a part of this party anymore." And there's more and more coming out about that the GOP is shrinking. And what it caused me to think about is, if the GOP continues to shrink, forget Trump, forget Congress, what about these state legislatures that they've been holding on to for all these years and gerrymandering so that they continue these wins? Isn't that where the battleground really falls?
Well, Chris, you've always been concerned about shrinkage, and so I don't find it surprising that you would bring up the topic. But certainly, the biggest fear has to be the state legislatures, because that was the most brilliant part of the Republican strategy.
It was
going in and taking over those, and
the Democrats just watched it happen
by way of doing that, controlling Congress.
Right. And
in a lot of Democratic-leaning states, since they had the legislature, they got to draw them out.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and that's the game, Chris. I had the opportunity to hear former House Speaker John Boehner last week, and that question came up. And one of the things he talked about is how the Democrats are grousing about the lines in state legislatures being gerrymandered, when years ago, and even now, when Democrats have power, they draw the line. So what we have to do at the state level is really work to get the vote out and really go after different voters, like, for instance, the Hispanic vote, and also courting black voters better and those independent white voters, to get them in areas like, Sugar Land, Texas, to go out and vote, because in that particular city, you have a large Indian population, and they have a candidate out there who has a real opportunity to upset somebody like a Pete Olson, who's in Congress right now. So, yes, the lines are drawn to favor the party that's in power, but we got a lot of work to do at the state level.
I did not hear Boehner have that talk, but that's not an apples to apples comparison. Yes, the party in power draws the lines, but the Democrats were, first of all, working under the civil right, the pre-clearance legislation that meant that the Justice Department had to approve districts the way they were drawn to ensure that voters were not discriminated against.
I saw some districts drawn by the Democrats.
No, yes, of course. They did whatever they could to draw them to their favor. But since then, we're not... southern states don't have to deal with pre-clearance issues. Voting rights laws have been weakened significantly. Republican-controlled state houses have passed laws that have shortened voter election days, number of election days, done away with closed polling places.
But that's a different question. I agree with that.
It's not a different question.
I agree with that. We're talking about gerrymandering.
I'm talking about polling. When you said that when the party in power draws the lines, and Boehner says, and the Democrats had their chance, and now we're having ours. But what
I'm not arguing
Republicans
against that.
Are doing something in addition to drawing lines.
Absolutely.
Have also worked to weaken voting rights laws. There is no more pre-clearance legislation, so there's no backstop. There's no safeguard. And once these things are in place, the deck is so stacked, and that's unfair.
Yeah.
That is a level of unfairness.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But we should also talk about why this is happening, because there's been so much talk about Trump's base and how solid the base is. And I've suggested several times on the podcast that, yeah, you have the base, but you have a whole lot of other Republicans who are horrified. And I have to admit, I was sort of talking out my ass because I didn't really know if there was any data to back that up or not. But now we see that
you didn't know for a fact
that there's a lot. Well, it's my sense. I have a lot of Republican friends, and I know my Republican friends aren't very excited about folks like Ted Cruz and Donald Trump.
Right.
And I wondered what they were going to do. And now if you have somebody like this individual stepping forward and saying, I'm done, and you've had a lot of other folks say that we're done.
George
I think it's going to become
George will flip.
Let me give you some more data than that. Susan Bevan, national co-chairwoman of the GOP, and Susan Coleman, co-chairwoman of the emeritus of the Republican Majority for Choice, wrote an op-ed for the GOP in the New York Times in June announcing they were leaving the party because of the party's long trend of turning its back on core issues like a woman's right to choose. Interestingly, they said in their op-ed, excuse me, that they didn't, and they wrote a stringing op-ed against the GOP and said they didn't even have time to address Donald Trump. That the party since Ronald Reagan has turned its back on every core issue that the GOP stood for.
Well, if you feel that strongly about a woman's right to choose and you're still in the Republican Party, you have a few screws loose to begin with. But I do think what's also interesting, and the Democrats better take note of, is that these people announce that they're leaving the Republican Party, but they're not becoming Democrats. They're becoming independent.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to make. And independent really is just, I'm a Republican, but I don't want to admit it right now. Or I'm going to vote for every other Republican except for Trump.
My dad was a classic example of that when he announced he was no longer a Republican, he was an independent. And I said, well, let me ask you, Mr. Independent, how many Democrats did you vote for in the last election? He said, none. I said, well, how many independents did you vote for? He said, well, none. Yeah. I said, well, I was just testing the limits of your independence. But the thing that strikes me about this, go ahead.
Well, but I think it's going to be interesting, especially in a place like Texas, where more people calling themselves independents than either the Democrat. The number of people identifying as independents is larger than the number identifying as either Democrat or Republican in the state of Texas. What that has always been in the past is most of those independents were just like your dad, saying they were independent, but going and pulling the Republican lever. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case anymore. And that's where the real battle lies, the fight for those independents, and it should go pretty heavily Democratic.
But I would disagree with that because, Trump aside, I think that you have this stealth group of Republicans who, you have a public group who say, I'm leaving the party, this is not my Republican Party, but you also have that stealth group of Republicans who basically will go and vote for Republican because of the economy, because of jobs, because he's keeping the country safe, allegedly. And so I think that you won't have that much turnover.
Well, if the party shrinks just 15%, that should be an opening in states like Texas and the South for Democrats to pick up seats in the local legislatures. And that's what the Republicans have been doing for the last 40 years. And that's what gave them the opening to take over in all of these states in the South. And Andy just spent a long time talking about the Voting Rights Act. And what the Democrats did for 40 years was rely on the Voting Rights Act to ensure that the voting was taken care of in the South while the Republicans took control. And instead of coming down here and politicking, we just let the Voting Rights Act do it, and now there's no protection down here. And so if the Democrats want to do something, they'll start paying attention to these voters and try to bring them back.
Well, I absolutely agree with that. And I look at the Hispanic vote and how the Naleo poll basically said that both party is ignoring this group of people. But I also think, Chris, that the Democrats have basically taken for granted the vote of, African Americans.
Oh, well, no question.
And, African Americans are not a monolith. They're asking different questions now because you have a younger group of African Americans who are not like their mom and dad Democrats.
What did Donald Trump say in the election? What have you got to lose? Well, now we look at it and say, well, apparently everything.
Yeah, absolutely. You were talking about your dad. I was talking to my dad just yesterday, and he says, we were talking politics. He said, I'm not liberal on everything. He says, I'm conservative on some things like abortion and gay rights. He's an 86-year-old black man. I get that. But, that is something that a Republican candidate can pick him off on, maybe.
Oh, God.
But he said, I'm mostly liberal.
Yeah.
All right, it's time to move on. We got a new game we have to play. Got to play the new game here. This is taking over the country. What job would you rather have? What would you rather be? And this is there's five jobs here. You all get to pick which job you'd rather have. So the first one here is: would you rather be a septic tank technician or White House press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders? Which one would you rather have?
Damn, that's
I'll
a
take
moral
the shit
choice.
house.
A septic what?
I'll take the actual
tank
shit
technician.
house. Not the White House. Shit house.
Well,
Are you guys still trying to
depends
decide?
on who's in the White House. He didn't
White House
say.
press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Have her job.
Oh, you would be okay being her if it were
I
Pence.
think I'd be like going after that shit.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think I'd go with Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Why? Because then you could just turn all this around.
Well,
You would just be a
both
truth
gonna
teller.
be
and
really horrible jobs, but
Will they both be
I just
shitty?
don't do good with septic tanks.
All right, job number 2: racehorse inseminator or Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
Okay, wait. Okay, I don't know.
So wait. You're talking about the female?
Oh wait, you were saying, do I get to fuck the horse?
Do I really have to explain this to
How
you?
do inseminators do that job?
I saw this on Real Sports once, and the
I didn't think this
the
required
male
an explanation.
Wait, it does.
You. Okay, I'm not.
Actually,
Jeff Sessions.
Do you want?
That's my answer.
I actually didn't think that required an explanation.
No, I would do the.
You're making this really hard, Chris.
How?
This is like my favorite Aggie joke.
Do you
The
want to
two
be-
Aggies who see the
Jeff
the
Sessions,
goat,
Racehorse
the goat.
Inseminator.
You don't actually. It's more of a. You can keep your clothes on.
No, James is thinking you're thinking it's like the Aggie joke where the two Aggies are driving down the highway and they see a goat caught up on the fence and they pull over the car and to clean it up for the podcast, the driver
now we're
gets
gonna
over
clean it
there
up?
and has sex with the goat, and then he comes back to the car and he turns to his buddy and says, "It's your turn," and the guy says, "Do I have to get on the fence?"
Next question.
Number 3:
Next question.
Kardashian bikini waxer or campaign chairman Paul Manafort.
Definitely
Bikini waxer.
Absolutely.
I would take that job too. I'd be the bikini wax. These are very easy. I'm going to give you some would you rathers that me and my boys play at home. Those are
Capitol
tougher.
police officer during the Kavanaugh hearings or HUD Secretary Ben Carson.
I know what James is going to say. He loves Sleepy.
I'm asleep over here.
I would be Ben Carson.
I want to be Ben Carson.
I want to be a brain surgeon. Or whatever he is.
Not anymore.
He was a brain surgeon until someone took his brain out. Yeah. All right, last one. First Lady Melania Trump or Melania Trump? Which one? Which one?
Neither. No.
Yeah. Either way.
I'd rather be just
The inseminator.
Melania.
I want to be
be
Mick Jagger.
inseminator.
I want to be Mick Jagger.
Surprised that hadn't been a television series. The Inseminator.
I want to be Quincy Jones.
All right.
Quincy Jones said he had Melania before Donald.
All right, that's enough of that. Tucker
He admitted it.
Tucker Carlson and diversity politics. Tucker Carlson, I hope you all heard this. Tucker Carlson is being called a racist for his rant last week against diversity on his Fox News Channel show. He said, "How precisely is diversity our strength? Since you've made this our new national motto, please be specific as you explain it. Can you think, for example, of other institutions such as, I don't know, marriage or military units in which the less people have in common, the more cohesive they are?" Carlson asked. "Do you get along better with your neighbors or your coworkers if you can't understand each other or share no common values?"
He's an idiot.
How precisely is diversity our strength?
Okay, first of all, obviously he only knows white people because he thinks that everybody else is so incredibly. I think that he thinks that we all speak different languages, we all have different religions. The only people he knows are white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and he couldn't possibly have a conversation with myself or James Campbell because obviously we just say ooga booga, and he can't understand what the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah.
But that
Carrying that pot on your head.
He needs to get out a little bit more and see what's going on in the world. Our strength is in our diversity.
Yeah.
It's
Well, he
true
doesn't understand what diversity means.
Right.
He
it's
got
like
hit
the
with
bow
it.
tie versus a regular tie. That's diversity.
But obviously, people talk about the strength of diversity because it shows that people with different backgrounds can work together.
Yes,
Right.
And he's obviously from the north, and he's from an area where he cannot grasp it. I've always laughed about people were just so amazed that Bill Clinton could get along with the African American community. Well, he had to. He was the governor of Arkansas. Arkansas has a lot of African Americans, and if you're going to succeed in politics as a Democrat, just like here, you better damn well know how to get along with people of color.
You mean like go and clap at church on the day before Election Day? Yeah.
But
yeah, I know what you're saying.
But a lot of folks just don't have any grasp of it, and obviously he doesn't.
He doesn't.
Diversity doesn't mean you're sitting there colliding.
But you know what? I also think, and I'm going to let you talk, James Campbell. I promise.
Please.
He's just trolling.
Yeah.
He's just trolling.
Absolutely.
He knows that what he's saying is ridiculous, and he's trying to get a rise out of people. And I didn't see this, but I read that he had Brit Hume on, and he made this statement. And when you get Brit Hume to defend diversity, like you've really gone over the edge. Yeah. It was ridiculous. I got that wrong. Tucker Carlson was saying that the Democrats hate America, and Brit Hume was saying, "Well, I don't know. I think we can agree to disagree. I don't think that I don't think just because people are on the left they hate America." He's just so far out there. I think that he's seen some rating increases, and he's just on this wave where the most outlandish thing, he can be, the more.
But I think what it
gets.
does is kind of stokes this fear of diversity in the country. Him and people like Laura Ingraham. But the reality is, like Generation Z. Your kid, Zach, make up 25% of the U.S. population. They're the largest population now, and half of those people are not white. And so, the demographics are going to change the country. Young Keegan, our producer here, is part of the millennial group, and, his friend group and his knowledge of this country is way different from us old folks sitting around this table. And that knowledge and your son's knowledge is going to change the way this country is governed and change the way, we see movies on television and television shows and newspapers, if they still exist, in
if they're
20
still there.
years.
I think if Tucker Carlson could just do one What's Left America episode, because we have quite a bit of diversity right around this table, and if he could see Andy come in carrying that big giant pot of water on her head when she comes into the podcast, he'd really understand how African Americans live.
That's right. Don,
I know you tote your own Cracker Barrel in every day, so we can all sit around it and talk about on the old homestead.
Don Lemon and
Seersucker suit.
CNN's Don Lemon and Bakari Sellers, Bakari Sellers, both jumped on this, and Bakari Sellers, I thought, had the best quote. Said it's the vein of white nationalism. But Scott Adams, I don't know if y'all saw what Scott Adams. He's the author of Dilbert. he said it's neither. It's neither racist nor anti-diversity or anything. He said, but you need to look at it as comparing us with North Korea. That's anti-diversity. They're all the same. They all think the same. They all look the same. There is no diversity in there. He said if that's what Tucker Carlson wants, that's what we end up with.
Well, that is what they want. Look at their makeup in Congress.
Right.
You don't want to hear my ice cubes? I'm having a drink so I can deal with this Dilbert and
I used to joke. I mean, when I was in Congress, I said, if you wanted the viewpoint of angry white men in America, you don't have to walk very far. Just the other side. Of the room. I mean, there they all were.
I mean, they all got elected.
I don't even understand. I don't understand Dilbert's comments. What's his name? Scott's whatever.
Well, I don't really understand Dilbert.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know. I didn't quite get that, but I think that it's just a thing where he's a troll.
That's what he is, and that's where it ends right there. The News Titans, Paul Manafort. You may remember him. He was according to the president, he just worked for the campaign for a few days. Really didn't have much to do. I think he was a coffee guy or something. But according to the president, he's a stand-up guy. He's never going to turn state's evidence. He's not going to turn on the president because he doesn't do those kind of things until now. Because he did turn, and he made an agreement with the special counsel, and he is going to tell everything he knows. This is the beginning of the end, if you ask me, because he was in the meeting at Trump Tower with the Russians, and that's the final key they were looking for.
Well, and I really hope Keegan can add some sad violin music as a backdrop to your intro there, because I know it pains us all to realize that we've reached this point. But yeah, I think we saw it coming. I think this is it for the kids, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I think that Don Jr. for sure is going to get indicted out of this, and what's his name, the son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is going to get indicted.
I think it depends on what he has. I think that he is a big fish, but I think there's more fish, I think, that Mueller's going to go after. I don't think that Manafort is the missing link unless you are just suggesting that meeting at Trump Tower is the piece that's going to connect.
I think it's the Russian piece.
Yeah, that's
Manafort is in so deep. He owed $10 billion? No, it couldn't be $10 billion. $10 million to
Russian oligarchs?
Yeah,
Deutsche Bank?
No, although Deutsche Bank has
Deutsche Bank's involved in it.
whatever. There's a Russian oligarch. He was desperate for money. He was just in a desperate situation, and desperate men do desperate things. He went over to the Trump campaign. He thought he could get some usefulness out of this, make his debt go away. He's in with the Ukrainians. Trump has been laundering money for years. I am sure the Trump Corporation has been laundering money for years through Russian banks and financial systems, and Manafort is the key to all of that. He knows everything.
He's going to give those final
tweaks
to what they've been looking for about the Russian ties to the Donald Trump campaign. And he's going to give it because he has it. He knows it. He brought it in. I promise you that he's the key to this. And it explains why Donald Trump has been openly talking about getting impeached at his rallies. And he says, if I get impeached, it's your fault. He's talking about that because he knows it's coming.
He's trying to preempt.
And Ivanka is openly talking about her concern that her father's going to get impeached. There is a reason why they're talking about it now.
Okay, Chris, what you're suggesting is that the House Republicans are going to basically bring the articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. And
they know the House is going to.
The House is gone.
So you think what you're suggesting, a blue wave is going to flip the House?
Right.
No, I said that. I said that 2 weeks ago.
They're at plus 14 in national polls. The Democratic Party's up in 3 different polls.
Well, you don't think the House is going to flip?
James, you're crazy.
I don't think he's crazy. I think that it's unknowable Because the polling, first of all,
we
don't know
trust
how
it.
to do polling anymore.
Andy, the national poll in 3 different polls has the Democratic Party up 12 to 14
Every
points.
poll
That is
had
a huge
Hillary
lead.
Clinton winning. Hillary Clinton's the president right now. If we can rely on the polling, it's the cell phone generation.
Right.
We don't know how to
I agree with
contact
that.
people anymore. We don't have reliable polling anymore. That's why we've been wrong about the elections all the time. We don't understand what's happening. I think it's a coin toss, honest to God.
I don't see any way the House stays in Republican hands. But
I hope you're right.
But it doesn't.
I hope you're right too.
Yeah,
I just don't think you're right.
I just don't know.
The Republicans are now even talking about the fact that they are afraid they're even going to lose the Senate at this point, and that's how concerned the Republicans are.
I don't know about that because there are 10 seats that are in play, and in most of those states, Donald Trump won significantly. So I don't know that the Senate is in play.
So look at Ohio, though.
Yeah.
Look how he won Ohio,
we thought that Hillary was going to win because of all the states that Barack Obama had won, and I don't know. The math didn't add up.
Play in Ohio, Chris.
But even with the polling, I think that the people who say that they are not in favor of Trump they don't want. People don't like to admit that they favor
exactly
Trump.
Right.
So you really can't. Even the people that you can contact, you can't really be sure that what they're telling you is what they really think.
So let me ask you this. Let's just look ahead here. That assume that I'm right after 30 years of practicing criminal law.
That has something to do with
indictments
politics.
Indictments are going to come down here
something to do with politics.
against the Trump children. I don't think he's going to go as far as try to indict the president because I think he's going to follow the Department of Justice guidelines. But let's say he indicts Donald Trump Jr. and Kushner. What's the long-term effect of that, and what does it do in 2020?
That was my question.
Yeah,
because here's the thing: there's no good scenario where, Democrats are on top. Because I'm of two minds about this whole impeachment thing. Because I think Pence is worse.
horrible.
It's a different kind of problem, but it's just as bad, if not worse. So
I think he would be seen as somewhat credible.
Right.
And
at least he wouldn't be tweeting out crazy stuff.
He's saying,
right?
and that kind of thing. And I would rather see the damage be done politically and see Donald Trump get his ass beat in 2020 and get the
Death by
White House
1,000
back
cuts,
for the Democrats.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think it will be very satisfying for all of us to see, Trump in an orange jumpsuit, if it ever came to that, or impeached. Just
he
to
wears
send
an orange
home.
jumpsuit every day.
That's true. His birthday suit is orange, but the replacement is not a win.
No,
2020
not at all.
is what we have to be focused on. But let's not lose sight of 2018. Let's not jump ahead.
I only posed it that way because whatever happens with Manafort is not going to affect the midterm. I mean, it won't happen.
No.
But I do think blending this topic with the earlier topic about post-traumatic Trump syndrome or whatever it is, I do think it's sort of fascinating. And I was thinking about that this week, that what he's done to the national mindset, or a big part of the national mindset, such as mine, I can't believe I have this much contempt for a president of the United States. But he really has gone against almost everything I believe in when it comes to our government, and I can't get past all of that. But I've never had an election where I woke up the next day and really felt like a good friend had died and was basically grieving, and it was really hard to go to work that day.
I said almost the same thing to my wife, that there's never been a time in my life when there was a president in the White House that I didn't respect, and I didn't agree with a lot of their politics. I didn't agree with their policies. I didn't agree with their decisions, but I respected that they were doing what they thought in their heart was the right thing for the country until now.
But I think the great thing about it, we're finally seeing, and if you didn't read George Will's column this week, try to find it. He focused on a congressional race, the 7th congressional race here in the Houston area, and talking about how Lizzie Fletcher really gets it, because he says that while the National Democratic Party keeps trying to shoot itself in the foot, it appears that people like Lizzie Fletcher understand that you really do have to start trying to build consensus again. And I think, and I hope that consensus will be cool again, because we can't keep going down this path.
We can't keep going down this path, but we're, in fact, more divided than ever. And the challenges to find a consensus are greater than ever, because we're being manipulated by God knows whom online. The idea that there are still, and this is not an idea, this is a fact, there are still Russians putting out fake stories on Facebook, making you believe that Black Lives Matter is holding a protest of something nonsensical to get the other side all riled up, when it's not Black Lives Matter posting these things at all, or some
South
crazy
Africans are killing white farmers.
Yes, well, and it's just, we're being manipulated. We're getting angry. I've been so angry since the election.
That's what I'm saying.
We've all been sad and angry and confused.
But about the Russians, so Willie Nelson announced this week that he was going to do the concert for Beto O'Rourke, and these people started posting that they would never, they'd never buy another anymore. Listen, they were done with Willie Nelson, and John Novolomax posted on Facebook that he really thinks it's probably Russian trolls, because who didn't know that Willie Nelson was a Democrat? Who wouldn't have left him long before? And they're the ones who would be posting some crap like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I have gotten to the point where I am not sure about anything I'm reading online. Like, and I'm just like, okay, like, keep an open mind. That maybe this is not real, but
so you can believe when I write something that is from the heart.
I know, baby.
Right, let's move into out of left field.
To you.
Shh, don't bring that up. Okay. All right, let's go into out of left field. Who wants to go first?
Okay, first of all, James was last week out of left field. He was so wrong about Serena. I could not believe. I know. I could hear it in your voices last week. You guys missed me so much. You just, Keegan called me and he said, man, they kept breaking down in tears, and I had to cut a bunch of places where they were just like, oh man, I wish Andy were here, because we don't know what we're talking about. And then I was like, yeah, you know what, Keegan? When I heard James Campbell talking about Serena
recollection
Williams,
of that.
I have no recollection of that either.
Well, I know you don't want to admit it, but James said Serena was wrong.
I confess to it.
James said Serena was wrong. I couldn't believe it.
So
this is by left field. Okay, now, she wasn't wrong. I don't have time to explain to you all the reasons why. But Chris Bell is sitting over there in a Texans hat, and I told him that he was going to be my out of left field if he didn't take that damn hat off. Who's the owner of the Texans? McCain? No, McCrane. No, what's his name?
Jim Crane.
Jim Crane. That motherfucker.
Y'all are so stupid.
No, this is by out of left field.
It's Bob.
Okay, I'm gonna
it's
interrupt
McNair.
you. No, okay, whatever his name. Miss McNair.
Don't get the wrong.
The Texans.
Bob McNair.
Don't get the wrong owner.
Look, I don't follow this shit, but you know what I do follow? Racism. And when that asshole said that the protests of police killing innocent black people carrying no weapons, shot in the back, that the protests were like the inmates running the prison, and then apologized in a half-ass apology, and then did an interview with the Wall Street Journal where he said, I never should have apologized. I don't know why I did that shit. I cannot believe anybody is still buying tickets, watching, wearing a baseball cap in public, emblazoned with the logo.
Supporting all those African Americans who were on the playing field.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
And that's Andy's out of left field.
Have you finished? So in Texas, we understand hurricanes. We understand fatalities and we understand the toll that it takes on lives, President Trump has come out to say that the response to the hurricane in Puerto Rico was great. It was tremendous, maybe the best ever response. But what he does is he disrespects the families of more than 3,000 people who lost loved ones. And that, to me, shows, as the op-ed writer in the New York Times said, we have amoral leadership in the White House. Because anyone that calls more than 3,000 people dying in a hurricane the greatest response that we've ever had just disrespects life. And that, to me, is a shame.
Well, they did not die for lack of paper towels. We know that.
That's exactly right. Because he was shooting them like basketballs at them.
Yeah, damn fool.
Many of us choose in our lives to take on what I call a life of service. I practice law, and I consider that to be service to the community and to the Constitution. And when you run for office, it's a life of service to the community. It's not about what you can do for yourself. It's about what you can do for others. And so many of the elected officials in our country have forgotten what it stands for, what it means to run for office, and forgotten that self-fulfillment and self-gratification is not what it's about. A life of service is more than being a fireman. It's taking care of those that you promised you would take care of. It's not taking care of yourself. And I'm tired of watching people at the top take care of only themselves.
Well, I'm going to lighten the load a little bit in the room. Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City was running an insurgent campaign for governor in New York against Andrew Cuomo, and Andrew Cuomo won this past week. But I heard that one of the big gaffes that Cynthia Nixon made on the campaign trail was buying a cinnamon raisin bagel, and then putting lox and capers and onion
cream cheese
on that bagel. And it brought back and people were just horrified that you'd never use lox and cream cheese on a cinnamon raisin bagel. And
for good reason.
It brought back a memory from mine on the campaign trail. My campaign manager for that campaign, Eric Burns, had worked out this great community event. It was back in 2001. I was running for mayor. And it was with the Hispanic community, and we went to a Mexican food restaurant here in town. And one reason Eric wanted to do it was that I really like menudo. And let's just face it, people love it in the Hispanic community, but not a whole lot of white guys eat menudo, but I really do like it. And so Eric thought, God, it was going to be so perfect. Well, you kind of have to be in a mood for menudo, or better yet, you need to be hungover. And I wasn't, and so I just didn't want it. And so when it came my turn to order, the combination that really appealed to me was the El Gringo plate. Eric said, "You motherfucker. I set this whole thing up so they can be impressed with you eating menudo. And not only do you not eat menudo, but you have to order the El Gringo." Could you have made it any more clear to the group? Anyway, they sort of...
And thus
it didn't really work the way we had planned. And that's my out of left field.
That's all the time we have this week. Be sure and like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Do all those things we need you to do, but more importantly, we need downloads. More important than that, go to Libsyn, go to your favorite podcasting site, and what do they need us to do? What do we need them to do, Andy?
Okay, I'm going to write this down.
What do we need them to do?
Put it in the show.
Just say it.
Subscribe.
That's what we need to do.
We keep forgetting.
Subscription parties.
We're gonna be up with the new website, right? What'sLeftAmerica.com.
As soon as they change my picture so I look like an albino.
But if you want, people can tweet us?
Wait.
They can find us on Twitter, and if you will find us on Twitter and send us a message, we will send you the Thinking Man's Ted Cruz or Beto O'Rourke bumper sticker, because it says Ted, one term, cruise, and people have to give that some thought what that means. But
please,
you'll be the hit of your neighborhood.
Yes, you don't have to put it on your car. You can put it on your kid's notebook. And but
you can strap it on your ass. We don't care.
Send us $20, and I will send you caricatures that we are not using on our new website. In which
O.J. Simpson,
James Campbell. You could tell it's James Campbell, but is
an
it O.J.
albino.
Simpson? An albino who does our intro, and Chris Bell. What does Chris Bell look like?
I look pretty handsome, I think.
He looks like if he put on a seersucker suit and maybe had a cigar, he would look like Boss Hogg or something like that.
It looks like some guy, one of his frat brothers, came up from behind and just
skewered him.
All right, that's it.
The inseminator.
Much thanks to Keegan DeLeo, our in-studio producer. Have a good week. We got to get out of here.